The sound of metal trays crashing against the floor was my earliest memory of Seattle's Pike District. I was 5 years old, standing at the edge of my father's tiny diner, watching his entire livelihood collapse in one loud, heartbreaking moment. That night, as he picked up broken dishes with trembling hands, he told me something that never left my mind. "Elena," he said quietly, "in this business, you either run the restaurant or the restaurant runs you." 26 years later, those words still echo in my head as I stand in the bustling kitchen of Ember and Oak, watching my staff prepare for a fully booked evening. They don't know I own this place. None of them do, except my lawyer and my accountant. To everyone else, I'm simply Elena Carter, the quiet, operational consultant who visits occasionally to observe workflow and kitchen etiquette. To my family, I'm a culinary school dropout who never followed through on anything. The disappointment, the cautionary tale, the child they rarely mention in public. My family has always believed my older sister, Dr. Vanessa Reyes, hung the moon. Successful surgeon, Harvard graduate, married to a neurologist, mom's pride, dad's bragging rights. Every dinner conversation in the Reyes household revolved around Vanessa. Her promotions, her research papers, her charity galas, her surgeries, her brilliance. And I would sit there quietly, a ghost at my own family table, acknowledged with polite nods, but never with admiration. I didn't help my case by dropping out of culinary school after 2 semesters. My mother told every relative who would listen that I threw my life away. "You're wasting your potential, Elena. Look at your sister. Vanessa is saving lives. What are you doing with yours?" What they never knew, what no one knew, was that I dropped out because I was too busy buying my first failing restaurant and flipping it for profit. While they pitied me, I was studying lease agreements. While they mocked me, I was learning profit margins. While they compared me to Vanessa, I was building the very empire they believed I was too incompetent to survive in. I operated through a maze of LLCs and holding companies. Anonymity was my weapon. The restaurant world respected power, but it bowed to mystery. Ember Roanoke was my masterpiece, the crown jewel. When it went up for sale after years of mismanagement, my family was devastated. It had been their special occasion restaurant for birthdays, anniversaries, engagement celebrations, and especially Vanessa's endless achievements. What they didn't know was that I bought it through one of my companies, funneled millions into renovations, curated a world-class team, and turned it into Seattle's most sought-after dining experience. And the irony? They still dined them regularly, proudly telling friends they were loyal customers of Ember Roanoke, bragging about getting reservations, not knowing the failed sister they looked down on for 2 decades was the one approving them. Elena Carter, Miguel, my general manager, approached with a tablet in hand. "The private party for tonight, the Reyes family, they've requested some special arrangements." My stomach tightened. Tonight was Mom's 65th birthday celebration, organized by Vanessa, of course. I'd received the invitation 2 weeks earlier, a clear afterthought, a reluctant obligation, a reminder that I was still the family's least favorite child. "What arrangements?" I asked, though I already had a guess. Miguel shifted uncomfortably. "They've requested 20 seats at the main table, but..." He hesitated. "They also asked for a small table near the kitchen hallway for one guest." I blinked slowly. "They said it's for a family member who's more comfortable being near the staff." I bit down on the inside of my cheek. Vanessa, always finding new ways to show me my place. She probably told the hostess it was for an anxious cousin or someone who doesn't fit the vibe. "I see," I said calmly. Miguel continued. "She was very specific about the champagne service, only for the main table." Of course she was. Heaven forbid the family disappointment sipped the same champagne as the medical royalty. I spent the next hour in my hidden office above the kitchen, quietly watching the security cameras as my family arrived. Mom and Dad first, dressed like they were attending a country club gala. Then Vanessa and her husband, picture perfect, polished, and insufferably confident. Behind them, aunts, uncles, cousins, faces full of smiles and entitlement. I arrived last, wearing a simple navy dress that cost less than Vanessa's earrings. The hostess, following instructions she didn't realize came from my sister, guided me to the tiny table near the swinging kitchen doors. "You can sit here," Vanessa announced loudly, making sure nearby diners could hear her. "Where you belong." She smirked dramatically. "After all, you always said you wanted to work in restaurants." The little cluster of relatives laughed politely. Mom looked embarrassed, but said nothing. Dad became fascinated with the tablecloth. I sat alone listening to their laughter, watching champagne flow freely at the main table while my water glass sat untouched. I watched my staff, my people, move with precision behind the kitchen door. Every dish was a symphony. Every movement was a dance choreographed by standards I built. Miguel approached my lonely table cautiously. "Can I get you something?" he asked quietly, torn between his loyalty to me and the instructions from Vanessa. I looked from him to the main table. My family, celebrating my mother's birthday in a restaurant they worshipped, not knowing they were worshiping my work. "Actually," I said, picking up my phone, "I think it's time we make a few changes to tonight's service." And in that moment, as I sat at the table they thought was a punishment, I realized something. They had no idea the storm I was about to bring. Because tonight, they were dining in my house. And in my house, eventually, everyone learns their place at the table. I own Emmer and Oak. The room didn't fall silent, it froze. But I didn't stop there. I own not just Ember and Oak, I continued, my voice steady and cutting through the birthday chatter. I also own the Redwood Hearth in Capitol Hill, Silver Lantern in Ballard, Ember Line Bistro by the waterfront, Copper Finch near South Lake Union, and Blue Ember Lounge downtown. Each name landed on that table like a heavy stone dropped into still water. Shock rippled, slow at first, then violently. These weren't just restaurants. These were Seattle landmarks. The kind of places people waited 3 months to get reservations at. The kind of places where Vanessa and her friends bragged about being regulars. My mother blinked rapidly, mascara trembling on her lashes. "Those restaurants," she whispered, "are owned by the Reyes Hospitality Group." "Yes, they are." I stepped toward the center of the dining room. Reyes Hospitality Group, founded by Elena Reyes, incorporated 8 years ago. Miguel stood stiffly beside me. "Could you bring my laptop from the office?" I asked. He nodded quickly and disappeared toward the back hallway. My family stared at me, the culinary school dropout, the disappointment, the daughter they rarely introduced proudly, trying desperately to piece together a truth they had ignored for over a decade. Vanessa's face twisted. "You dropped out of culinary school. You barely lasted 2 semesters. "I dropped out," I corrected, "because I didn't have time to finish school while buying my first restaurant." Their eyes widened as if the concept was impossible. I went on. "It was a failing Italian place in downtown Seattle. I bought it for pennies, rebuilt it, sold it 6 months later for a profit large enough to buy 2 more failing places. I repeated that process until I collected enough revenue to build a dynasty." Miguel returned with my laptop. I opened it and connected wirelessly to the restaurant's digital display screens. In an instant, every monitor in Ember and Oak, the ones normally showing wine selections, nightly specials, and chef's recommendations, lit up with financial dashboards, revenue charts, ownership records, profit margins, growth trajectories. Gasps echoed across the room as guests stopped eating, watching in stunned fascination. "Current annual revenue across all properties," I announced, "is $38 million. Silence. "Net profit last year, $14.2 million. Aunt Rosa clutched her chest. "Current valuation of Reyes Hospitality Group? Over $170 million. Dad choked on nothing, his face turning pink. The former accountant in him was already recalculating the numbers in his head. Vanessa gripped the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her husband stared at me like he'd never seen me before in his life. I continued, my voice filling the room. "All those times you seated me near the kitchen, you were sitting in a restaurant I built, a place I own, a team I trained, a legacy you dismissed as a phase." Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Mom whispered a prayer under her breath. Dad wiped sweat from his forehead. "But that's not all," I said. I tapped a key. Every screen shifted to a list, their names, dates, times, linked credit card transactions. "Here," I continued, "are all the times you used this restaurant group without knowing it was mine." I pointed to the first entry,
The day you made fun of me for never sticking to anything, you were dining at Copper Finch, using my servers, my chefs, my recipes. I tapped again. Here's the time you mocked my career choices while celebrating Vanessa's promotion in a private booth I designed. Tap. And here, I said, my voice softening but cutting deeper, is the time Vanessa demanded my manager at Silver Lantern be fired because he wouldn't give her a last-minute reservation. Vanessa shook her head violently. I didn't. You did, I said simply. And you posted a 1-star review online after threatening the staff by saying you knew the owner personally. Gasps erupted around the table. Vanessa looked like someone had punched the air out of her lungs. But I didn't know it was you, she protested. That, I said, is exactly the problem. I nodded toward Miguel. He disappeared behind the kitchen doors again. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Dad stared at the table, ashamed. A moment later, a team of servers walked out, each holding thick folders. I stepped aside as they began distributing them around the table. What is all this? My uncle whispered. Documentation, I said. They opened the folders, hands trembling. Inside were the records of every reservation they ever made, every special favor they requested, every exaggerated complaint, every undertipped bill, every time they name-dropped Vanessa to get better service, every incident of rudeness towards my staff, every behind-the-scenes favor I granted anonymously, every holiday bonus I personally paid to make up for the tips they didn't leave. Mom covered her mouth as tears streaked down her cheeks. Dad sank back in his chair, stunned. Vanessa looked physically ill. And finally, I said, my voice slow, clear, and deliberate, you'll find lifetime bans from all Reyes Hospitality Group restaurants. My mother gasped. You can't be serious, she started. Vanessa stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. You can't do this, we're family. Family? I raised an eyebrow. Was it family when you seated me by the kitchen tonight? Was it family when you spent 20 years mocking my dream? Was it family when you treated every employee at every restaurant like they were beneath you? Vanessa swallowed hard. Mom reached for my hand. Dad whispered my name. I stepped back. Miguel, I said, please escort them out. Make sure the bans are activated immediately. The security team approached the table. Dad tried one last time. What about the bill tonight? Consider it my final gift, I replied, my voice cold and calm. A farewell dinner from the daughter you tried so hard not to see.
The procession toward the exit was slow, humiliating, and quiet. Vanessa opened her mouth one last time, but the additional guards stationed near the door stopped her. Once they were gone, I turned to the other guests. I apologize for the disruption, I said with a nod. Tonight's meals are on the house. Enjoy your evening. The dining room exploded into applause. I returned to my small table near the kitchen, the one Vanessa thought was a punishment, and Miguel placed the most expensive bottle of wine in front of me. My favorite place in the restaurant, because from here I could hear everything. The rhythm, the heartbeat, the empire I built. And this was only the beginning. Over the next several weeks, the calls began. First Mom, then Dad, then Vanessa, always in that order. Mom left long voicemails, tearful ones, telling me she was proud of me now, as if pride was a thing to be handed out only after public humiliation forced the truth into the open. Dad sent paragraphs of emails unpacking my business valuation, offering advice about tax strategies I didn't ask for. Vanessa's messages were the strangest of all, swinging back and forth between anger, guilt, and attempts at forced reconciliation. I ignored every single one. They had spent 20 years treating me like I was nothing. 20 years calling me the struggling child, the one we worry about, the late bloomer, the one who just needs direction. 20 years comparing me to a sister whose shadow never quite stopped stretching into every corner of my life. So I let their messages sit unanswered, a collection of digital ghosts reminding me of everything I had survived. 6 months passed. Seattle's skyline glowed golden under the early summer sun as I made my way to my newest project, the restaurant that wasn't about revenge or numbers or empire building. It was about legacy. A small, intimate place tucked between a community art gallery and a local nonprofit office. I named it Second Chances, because that was a kind of place I desperately needed when I was younger. A place where someone believed in you long before you believed in yourself. We hired people who had been turned away everywhere else. Formerly incarcerated individuals, recovering addicts, single parents with shattered resumes, women escaping abusive homes, veterans living in shelters. We trained them. We fed them. We taught them the rhythm of the kitchen, the heartbeat of opportunity. We gave them what the world had denied them, a fresh start. On opening night, I stood in the middle of the kitchen as stoves hummed, pans sizzled, and nervous voices whispered final checks. The room was vibrating with energy. I felt something grow warm in my chest. Pride. The true kind. Not the kind my family only expressed when a doctor's coat or a medical certificate was involved. Not the kind built on prestige or reputation. This was pride born from resilience, sweat, discipline, and compassion. Elaine, Miguel said softly beside me. He always found me in the kitchen right before big moments, like he understood my mind better than my own blood ever had. Your family's outside. I blinked. What? They're at the front entrance, he said. Your sister made a reservation under a different name. They're asking to speak with you. For a moment, the world went quiet around me. The sizzling pans, the clanging metal, the crew's voices, all faded into white noise. I thought about the lonely girl I once was, sitting at that small table by the kitchen at Ember and Oak, listening to her family laugh at her from across the room. I thought about the years I stayed silent, the years I accepted their judgment, the years I tried to make myself smaller so they could shine. And then I thought about the empire I had built, the opportunities I created, the lives I was reshaping one second chance at a time. I tied my apron tighter, smoothing the front with calm hands. Then I looked at Miguel. Tell them, I said slowly, that the owner is busy cooking. His lips twitched. And remind them, I added, about their lifetime ban. A grin tugged at the corner of Miguel's mouth. He nodded and headed toward the front. Around me, my team moved in synchronized motion, each of them a story of survival, a testament to transformation. People the world had cast aside, people who knew the bitterness of judgment, people who had been told they weren't enough, just like I'd been told. All right, everyone, I said, raising my voice above the sound of the kitchen. Service starts in 5 minutes. Let's show Seattle what second chances look like. They joined me, voices strong, steady, united. In that moment, it felt like we weren't just running a kitchen. We were healing one. The night moved like a symphony, the good kind, the kind that stirs something primal inside your chest. Plates left the past flawlessly. Guests smiled warmly. The aroma of garlic, rosemary, and roasted citrus filled the air. Hope filled the room like a scent you couldn't shake off. Hours passed, and eventually I stepped out into the dining area. Not as the consultant they once believed me to be. Not as the invisible daughter. Not as the shadow behind someone else's spotlight. But as a woman who built something meaningful. Something powerful. Something that mattered. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the large windows near the door. My family, standing outside on the sidewalk, peering through the glass as if looking into a world they no longer could enter. Vanessa's face was tight with frustration. Dad's posture was stiff with humiliation. Mom's eyes were red. But instead of pain, I felt peace. They couldn't walk inside. They couldn't take a seat. They couldn't claim a connection to this place or to the empire behind it. For the first time in my entire life, their approval didn't matter. What mattered was the laughter inside, the staff plating dishes with trembling pride, the customers enjoying meals prepared by hands that trembled for different reasons. I returned to the kitchen, to the heat, the noise, the rhythm. The next morning, the messages continued. Mom begging to talk, Dad apologizing, Vanessa trying to negotiate. But every attempt ended at the same closed door. Because some doors are meant to stay closed, especially the ones you spent your whole life knocking on while no one bothered to open them. Over time, my family tried everything, making reservations under fake names, having friends call on their behalf, showing up during slow hours hoping to slip in unnoticed. Each time, they were politely turned away. Each time, the lesson deepened. Success, real success, can't be faked, borrowed, or stolen. It must be earned and then protected. I still visit Ember and Oak every week, still sit at that small table by the kitchen, the one meant to humiliate me. Turns out it became my favorite spot. From there, I can hear the heartbeat of everything I've built, the clatter, the rhythm, the timing, the music of a life I created with my own two hands, a life no one can diminish now, a life entirely my own. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served with flawless timing, impeccable presentation, and a side of lifetime ban. And as I raise a glass of my most expensive wine each night in that once humiliating corner, listening to the symphony of a well-run restaurant, I remember one simple truth. In this business, you either own the restaurant or the restaurant owns you. And I chose ownership of my kitchen, my craft, my success, my peace, and my story. Forever.